You lied to me. I had to. I knew you wouldn't approve, and I was trying to help. Isn't that what Grims do? Don't throw that silly catchphrase at me, Henry snapped. Well, Veronica steeled herself. Now that the secret's out, you must know that there are at least 200 Everafters running around Manhattan. So if you're trying to get away from them, not a problem, Henry interrupted. We're moving. Moving? Sabrina gasped, appalled. Moving away from New York City was not part of a dream reunion she had been imagining. Yes, we'll move far away to somewhere no ever after would want to live. Like where? I don't know. Canton, maybe. Canton, Ohio, Veronica groaned. No one wants to live in Canton, Ohio. I don't want to live in Canton, Ohio. It doesn't matter where we live, where we move, as long as it's boring, Henry shouted. We'll find some place where the mayor isn't royalty and the local police aren't magical transforming pigs. Actually, the sheriff of Nottingham is running the police department now, Sabrina corrected. I miss Elvis, Daphne whimpered. Veronica turned to face her husband. So, you're laying down the law, huh? Do I get to say in any of this? Or am I supposed to play the dutiful wife? Perhaps you'd like me to put on an apron and make you a pot roast too? Henry scowled. Veronica, that's a bit dramatic. I miss Elvis, Daphne repeated. You're not going to drag me and the girls through this world hiding from pixies and fairy godmothers. They're out there and most of them are not bad people. Pixies are not people, Henry snapped. And don't you try to tell me about Everafters. I've lived side by side with them most of my life. My mother's best friend is one. I used to be in love with one. I'm painfully aware of your love life, Henry Grimm, Veronica seethed. I woke up this morning from a 2-year sleep to find your old girlfriend sitting over you with her big moon eyes. Veronica, I can't believe you're jealous, Henry whined. Sabrina didn't know much about adult relationships, but she was pretty sure it was a mistake to accuse your wife of being jealous of an old girlfriend. Her mother looked like a volcano preparing to explode. Jealous? Henry sputtered. I didn't exactly mean. What do I have to be jealous about? She cried. I'm the best thing that ever happened to you, pal. You hit the lottery when you met me. I'm smart. I'm funny. I can throw a 60-mile-an-hour fastball. And I'm a babe. Henry's face turned bright red. I am the luckiest man in the world. You've got that right, she cried. And after a moment, she took a deep breath and continued. Henry, we're still a family, a team, and we're supposed to make decisions together. There has to be a smarter way to keep all of us safe. Wait, where's Daphne? Sabrina spun around, but her sister was nowhere to be found. She must have gone back to see Elvis. Wait here, I'll go get her, Henry said. He took off running back the way they'd come, leaving Veronica and Sabrina alone. They shared a glance and then raced after him. Henry's voice rang through the forest. He called out for Daphne, demanding she come back, but he was wasting his breath. Daphne was stubborn, maybe even more stubborn than Sabrina, and when she wanted to do something, there was no talking her out of it. When Sabrina and Veronica finally caught up with Henry, he was standing with Daphne in a clearing of trees with his hand clamped around her arm. This is unacceptable, young lady, he scolded. I'm not leaving, Daphne said. They need us. What makes you think you can do anything to help? Henry demanded. You're only 5 years old. Dad, she's 7, Sabrina corrected. 8 in 2 weeks, Daphne snapped. And I've fought plenty of bad guys in the last year. I'm a Grim. This is what I do. Just then, no fewer than a dozen hulking figures stepped out from behind the trees, surrounding the family. They each stood nearly 7 feet tall, with a bumpy gray skin like that of an alligator. Their eyes were enormous and bloodshot, and their ears were pointy and covered in what looked like porcupine quills. A few held long spears, and others clung to clubs with dozens of rusty spikes nailed into them. Sabrina recognized them as hobgoblins. One of the monsters stepped forward. His chest was decorated in gaudy medals and his face in scars. Like all of the hobgoblins, his chest was painted with the mark of the scarlet hand. He surveyed the Grims, and his face lit up with a sick grin. I knew if I recognized the foul stink that comes off humans, but I never suspected we'd find ones who are so famous, he said. You want an autograph? Sabrina grumbled. Henry shut her and looked and told her to keep her mouth shut. A second monster lumbered forward to join his leader. They must be coming from Charming's camp, he said. They've allied themselves with the traitor and his troublemakers. That means it must be nearby, the leader crowed. He turned back to the family and gnashed his crooked yellow teeth. Now, let's avoid any unpleasantness, shall we? Tell us where the camp is. We don't have any idea what you're talking about, Henry lied. We're not coming from any camp. My family and I are just out for a picnic. The hobgoblin leaned forward until his face was only an inch from Henry's. You're lying. All of you Grims lie. That's not a very nice thing to say, Henry said. I'm hurt. If you don't tell me where the camp is, then there's a lot more hurt coming. Henry shook his head. We've gotten off on the wrong foot. Let's start over. My family is not involved with Charming. We have refused to take a side in your conflict, and we are on our way to the train station now. So if you'll kindly step aside and let us pass, we'll get you out of your hair. You'll go where I tell you, human, the monster snorted and then turned to his men. Bind their hands. If they won't tell us where the foot is, we'll beat the answer out of them, starting with the children. One of the hobgoblins clamped his hands down on Sabrina's arms. She tried to pull free, but he was too strong. She stomped her heel down hard on his exposed toes and yelped in agony. Why, you little terror, I'm going to tear your arms off and hit you with them, he threatened. There was a flash of fists and feet, loud groans, and a cracking of bones. At first, Sabrina couldn't tell who had arrived to rescue them, but it soon became clear that her mother and father had leaped into action. Henry was like a tornado, whipping from one hobgoblin to the next, planting punches with incredible accuracy. The way he fought looked like dancing. He was kicking and punching to a rhythm only he could hear. Veronica was not quite so elegant. She snatched a thick branch off the forest floor and clubbed anyone who got close. Sabrina remembered one evening when her parents took her to the boardwalk at Coney Island. At the betting cages, Henry and Veronica decided to see who could hit the most fastballs. Veronica won by a landslide, smacking the balls hard into the netting. The monster's ribs and heads weren't nearly as hard as baseballs, but she swung for the fences anyway. Working together, Henry and Veronica managed to take out 8 of the monsters. Sabrina looked over at her sister. Our parents are so gravy, Daphne scowled. That's not how you say it. Girls, run for the camp! Henry shouted as he fought off a hobgoblin who was charging at him with a spear in hand. No, we can help, Daphne challenged, assuming the fighting stance she'd learned in Miss White's self-defense class. Listen to your father, Veronica cried, smashing her branch into the belly of one of the beasts and knocking him to the ground. Sabrina snatched her sister by the hand and pulled her down the path toward the fortress. We have to go back, Daphne said. We can't just leave them. Our parents are tough, Sabrina said, doing her best to sound confident. They'll be right behind us. The girls ran and ran. By the time they came to Charming's camp, Sabrina was so spent she could barely shout for help. A sentry appeared in the tower and aimed a magic wand at them. Stand back, invaders, he shouted, as a blast of white hot fire exploded at Sabrina's feet. Open the gate, Sabrina cried. It's Sabrina and Daphne Grimm. Monsters are chasing us. The sentry blew a whistle and the big gate swung open. Before the girls could take a single step inside, a regiment of knights on horseback charged past them. The girls were nearly trampled before Charming rushed to their side with his silver sword in hand. He snatched Sabrina by the arm. Where are these monsters? He shouted. Sabrina pointed back the way they'd come. There are at least a dozen, maybe more. They're attacking my mom and dad. You fools! You may have led them to us, he cried in disgust. Freaky monsters were trying to kill us, Sabrina said. Should we have just died out there so you could keep your clubhouse secret? Absolutely, the prince said. I knew you'd come back, Puck said as she strolled through the gate. You got it bad for me, don't you? Sabrina would have slugged the fairy boy, but just then Henry and Veronica appeared, looking slightly worse for wear. Henry's lip was bloody and Veronica had a long scratch on her right arm. How many were there? Sir Charming demanded. 14 that we saw, Henry replied. They're hobgoblins. We managed to subdue 12 of them. If you walk along the path, you'll find them. And the other 2? They ran, Veronica said, still clinging to a heavy branch. Cowards. Charming pulled a knight aside and ordered him to gather as many of the merry men as he could. Find those hobgoblins. If they get back to the hand, they'll reveal where we are, and we'll be overrun by nightfall. A moment later, a well-armed posse of archers and swordsmen was racing out into the forest. Chapter 4. Before nightfall, the camp received more than 3 dozen new Everafter refugees. They looked tired and broken. Many shared tales of brutal beatings, threats, and murder. Mr. Canis called them guests and informed them that in joining the camp, they had an obligation to all the other refugees. Each person will be assigned tasks the next morning based on their occupations or talents, but until then, they should try to get some rest and something to eat. Robin Hood's wife, Mary Ann, led the newcomers on a tour and then to the supply tent for fresh clothes. She promised hot meals and clean bunks. Charming marched through the camp, spreading news of the hobgoblin attack. The story seemed to startle everyone, especially the recent arrivals. The hand is bringing the fight to us, the prince said. It's time to prepare for war. But his call to action didn't produce his desired response. He was largely ignored. Many of the Everafters said they didn't want to get involved, even if they were shaken by the prince. That seems to be the end of this video. I'll send you later. Goodbye.